Good morning, students. Today we are going to learn about Piaget stages of development, and let's not waste any more time. Let's get started. So, uh, before I discuss stages of development, what I really want to discuss is that most of these stages of development that you might learn, although they have been set in a particular manner, there are definitely certain supports to it and criticisms to it. You need to be cognizant about those factors before getting into using them directly in your interventions or using them to create your intervention strategies. So let's start. When we talk about Piaget, first of all, it's the name that is the most difficult part. If you don't get the name correctly, you won't get marks in the exam. Um, Now, as we already know that it's a Swiss name, so he's a Swiss psychologist, and he's widely known for his theory of cognitive development. In fact, so much so that almost all colleges agree that there's a theory that must be taught. Um, One of the most intriguing part about his theory is the structure to the theory. His theory has got a stage level structure to it, which is something that is age related, unlike other theories which are definitely age related, but definitely there's a certain level of vagueness. Piaget's theory does not offer any such vagueness. It is quite precise and accurate in how theory should be applied. um, Let's start with the background of Piaget because it plays a major role in how the theory was developed. He was definitely a very intelligent child. He has written certain number of papers right from the age of 10 and started his university by, I guess, somewhere around the age of 15. Uh, as you can see in the PPT that he has already earned his doctorate by the age of 21. Now he has studied, although in the PPT as you can see that most of his study has been in the area of biology and physiology, he has definitely studied other areas of sciences as well, including physics, math and chemistry. It's just that he is more widely known for his contributions in the areas of biology and physiology and definitely psychology as we know him now. Um, One of the earlier confusions when it came to learning was that do people come up with innate knowledge? That is, they are born with certain level of knowledge and they just build up on it, or do they just observe and learn, or do they actually observe, process the information in a certain way, and build on it? So, as to say, being a little scientist who observes, understands, realizes, and then is able to apply it in multiple scenarios. Of course, now since we are talking about Piaget, we are talking about the last option over here, which is called as constructivism. Uh, in terms of Piaget's theory, we are talking about the little scientist theory. The idea is that Piaget believed that the children do not just merely observe and learn and document information in their mind. They rather observe, then process that information, and then try to use it in different scenarios to see where it fits. If it does not fit anywhere, then they most likely won't be able to remember that information later on. If it fits somewhere, it doesn't have to be a practical behavior, it can be even in terms of thoughts. But if it fits anywhere, then that information may be retained or may be better retained. As you can see in the PPT that um, I'm sorry, I'm not able to see the PPT. Yeah. So his theory of little scientist mostly looked at the world from a little different lens from what the world was back then, when people believed that children were basically tiny adults. And so these two theories, the little scientist theory and the tiny adult theory, they have been there in the history for quite a bit of time. The tiny adult theory has been there from the Greek times, wherein people believe that children are basically tiny adults, hence they should be put to work and be they should be made to work such that they become more precise at what they're doing, that they do it over and over again so that they become precise. And that's why you might also see in paintings of olden times where children just have faces of adults. It looks slightly creepy. The little scientist theory mostly has come up in bits and pieces somewhere in the 60s and has developed properly, moving towards the 80s and 90s. And right now, the little scientist theory is definitely accepted to a greater level, although there are certain criticisms to it. Now, uh, Piaget has offered us two different theories. One is his theory of cognitive development, and another one is his theory of moral development. They both play a part when we are trying to understand what Piaget is really trying to say. Um, at first, if you read Piaget, he sounds rather simplistic in comparison to the other theories. However, there are multiple layers to what he's saying, and it is when you try to apply his theories in terms of your interventions that is where the confusion really arises. So I'll try to give you a bit of insight on both of these theories. Definitely, I will prefer it if you go up and read more about it. I'll attach certain resources and certain other videos when I share this video with you. So, um, right now, just understand that there is a concept called equilibrium, and which is the main driving factor for development of a child. And what equilibrium is that if I am a child and I have some amount of information, if I am able to use that information correctly in a given environment, I am in a state of equilibrium. I don't need to know more things, hence I don't need development at all. However, if I'm trying to use that information in a given environment and it doesn't work, I am in a state of disequilibrium. I need to develop further. And that is the motivation that is required. And this is what this is why equilibrium or disequilibrium is a driving force of Piaget's theory in cognitive development. Now, uh, now getting into the theory a little more, there are two more concepts. One concept is called assimilation, and another concept is called accommodation. So let's say I am a child and I have some set of information and I try to use it in a certain scenario. Now let's say it doesn't work. Hence, I need to now get more information or I need to understand more. So I'm in a state of accommodation. I need to accommodate more information so that it works. Now, let's get a little more technical over here. So, there's something called a schema. Schema is basically a set of responses that I make to a certain stimuli. Something happens in front of me and I need to react to it. That reaction requires knowledge. And this whole reaction is known as a schema. It's a pattern of behavior. Now, a child will learn a lot of schemas by mere observation at the start. Now, let's say a child realizes that every time a spoon is put in front of its mouth and it opens its mouth, it's supposed to, the spoon will enter its mouth and it will be able to eat, right? So it has learned, its schema is spoon in front of the mouth, open your mouth, the spoon enters your mouth, and now you can eat. But let's say that now there is a person who is trying to feed the kid by hand. Now, the kid will try to use the same ideas. If the kid uses the same knowledge and tries to open its mouth and then the food enters its mouth, then this process is known as assimilation. The same knowledge is used in a different scenario and it works. In that scenario, the process is called assimilation. However, if the process does not work, then the child requires accommodation, where it needs to learn new behavior. For example, the child is with mother and every time the child gets hungry, the child cries and it gets food. However, now the child is put into a school and it gets hungry and it cries and nobody gives it food. Now it needs to learn a new set of behavior to get the food. This process will require accommodation. So assimilation is having the same knowledge, applying it into a different scenario and that working. Accommodation is having knowledge, applying it to a scenario and it not working and you requiring more information and you going ahead and getting more information. Now, if we talk in terms of equilibrium and disequilibrium, if assimilation occurs, it will lead to a state of equilibrium. if accommodation occurs, at the start it would be a state of disequilibrium because nothing worked and would lead to a state of equilibrium. Now remember one other thing. Accommodation has to occur first in terms of development, followed by assimilation. So to give you a much more simple flowchart idea of this, uh, as a child, I am currently at a state of equilibrium, and a new situation is presented to me. I use the process of assimilation, doesn't work. Now I use the process of accommodation, now it worked, and now I'm again back to the state of equilibrium. In the middle, I was in the state of disequilibrium. Now, another area of assimilation, an example of that would be, let's say, the idea of dog. Now there are two different dogs over here, two different pictures of dogs over here, and I know both of them are dogs because my schema of what a dog is says that both of these are dogs. But as a kid, I might need to learn. So let's say at the start, I have only seen the dog at the left hand side. Alright, and now I see another creature on the right hand side. Now at start, I would be at a state of disequilibrium because I don't know what this creature is. Is it a rat? Is it a mouse? Is it some other animal that I've never learned of? My mom says it's a dog, so now I have a process of accommodation to re-update my knowledge. And now I've reached a state of equilibrium again. Now, there has been a lot of confusion as to what Piaget says about applying his theory in terms of education. Now remember, Piaget is a constructivist. He believes that children are little scientists. And if we look at how education was based back then, and even a lot of education, how it's based right now, it's based on the ideas of Industrial Revolution, which says that you observe, you learn to do a certain skill, and you do it exactly like that, and you will be successful in life. Piaget did not exactly agree with that idea. According to Piaget, children are little scientists, hence they should observe, they should be given time to think and develop on those ideas. So he put a lot of importance on a person's own knowledge, and we do see the significance of that right now. As interns yourself, we provide you some amount of knowledge and we expect you to develop your own ideas on it and apply it in a certain way or create new intervention strategies based on that, because that is what will get you to succeed in terms of being a better psychologist. You'll have to innovate, accommodate, and assimilate, and create better models which might work for your clients later on. Now let's so now that was the moral theory of development, Piaget's moral theory. Now let's get to Piaget's stages of cognitive development. Now, the moral theory plays a major role in influencing these stages to a certain extent. However, the extent of which it influences is debatable. So, Piaget, according to Piaget, as I said before, his stages are distributed by age or differentiated by age. So, according to Piaget, there are 4 stages of development. There is sensory motor, which occurs from birth to 2 years of age. There's a little deviance, it can occur to 2.5 years as well. There's pre-operational, which occurs from about say 2 years of age to 7 years of age. There's concrete operational, which occurs from about say 7 years of age to 11, and formal operational, which is 12 years to 15 years and leading to becoming a full-grown adult post that. Now, even Piaget believed that there are going to be variations in these. Now, he believed that mostly because he observed children from multiple areas and saw that children don't develop exactly in the same way in different areas. Not only that, what Piaget did not really focus on was, or write about, were the other environmental factors that play a role in a child's development. We do community visit to understand nutritional differences, which plays a major role in reaching these milestones. Although Piaget did not particularly write about that, we do have a lot of studies which show how Piaget's stages might differ if nutritional needs are not met, or if environmental variables are different from what it should ideally be. So now let's talk about the first stage. So there's birth to 2 years, and from birth to 2 years, there's a lot of change that occurs because of the child observing a lot of things. The child is at this point explorer, and it's everything is new to the child. So the child is observing and creating a lot of data units in its mind, it's creating a lot of schemas in its mind about how the world functions. However, the child is not able to understand that other people exist as people. For the child, other people exist as moving objects or moving things. So the child cannot see from anything other than his own perspective. There is no second level of thinking. For example, uh, I might talk to you and let's say that you have done something terrible. However, I won't speak extremely ill to you because I know you might feel bad, and that idea requires me to have certain level of empathy, and that is not yet developed in the child as of now. Yes, we can debate on what empathy is supposed to be in terms of behavior and in terms of emotion, but over here I'm only talking about the emotional aspect of it. Um, Now, there are a lot of other things that occur in this stage. Since the child is completely on observation exploration mode, the child will, if you give the child your finger, the child will tend to hold it. And this will not only occur with the finger, you give the child any object, and the child will have a grasping reflex towards it. Not only that, and this is a characteristic feature of the stage. Not only that, the child will follow moving objects with its eyes, and this is particularly a biological or a neurological response because up till now the skull has not developed properly, and the movement of the eyes are very much apparent, very much easy to notice. uh, and it becomes difficult to notice as the child grows older and the skull size differs, and so the sockets of the eyes also tend to change a bit in terms of shape, and also the eyes grow deeper. Now, there is not much to talk in terms of sensory motor stage, primarily because while we are talking about the stage, most of your interventions may or may not focus on the stage. However, I have attached a few other resources that will help you understand the stage a little more in depth. It will give you a little more insight about the stage. Now let's talk about the pre-operational stage. From the word itself, you are understanding that the child pre-operational is before all of your major operations, your ability to do major operations occur, or you're able to do major operations in your life. Uh, what happens before that? What kind of abilities do you have before that? So one of the things that develops is speech, ability to talk properly. When I say speech, I don't mean uh, the person develops amazing vocabulary. What I mean is that the person develops ability to gain some level of vocabulary to actually express themselves properly and to have the need to express themselves properly. Uh, Also, they also develop the meta level of thinking, that is to say that they can reflect on their past and they can think about their future. Uh, there's a lot of cognitive development that occurs in this stage, and it is very much visible. In fact, it is visible in terms of weekly development sometimes. Um, Usually there's a time where you might actually notice some parents say that my kid is developing really really fast, like he's doing amazing things, and some parents saying that my kid is just not developing properly. Maybe the neighbor's kid is able to do multiplication tables up till 7 or 5, but my kid only knows multiplication tables up till 3. Now, one of the things that you need to understand about this entire phase is that there are delays in in some development of factors. Uh, However, that does not mean that, or however, it is not exactly a bad thing. The goals are still reached. When I say there are delays, I mean to say maybe the knowledge hasn't been assimilated or accommodated properly. Maybe the schemas are not developed properly, and this will be based on what the schemas were developed in the sensory motor skill as well, sensory motor stage as well. Um, so if you are actually meeting parents from this who are between the age range of 2 to 7, and the parent is complaining that their child is not developing fast enough, uh, the first thing that you need to notice is there actually a empirical, is there actually empirical evidence to that, or like the goals are not set into place, or the goals are not even realized by the kid, or is it something that there's just a small delay in terms of development? Also, you might have to notice that is there any dysfunction. If there is absolutely no dysfunction, that means that the goals are set properly, because you cannot get the kid to verbalize the goals properly. uh, Hence, if there's no dysfunction and if there are no nutritional deficiencies and the family environment is proper, the development delays may be genetic sometimes, but usually they're nothing to worry about. Um, However, one of the major problems is that although the child has understood how to think about future and how to reflect upon its past, it cannot really distinguish between fantasy and reality. And this is rather a beautiful thing, because child may not be able to differentiate between cartoon characters not being real people. The reason it's really wonderful is because you can teach the kid a lot of things, because the fantasy world and the reality are together as one. And that's why you would see a lot of educational resources have cartoons in it, or actually they try to portray a person with an actual personality in terms of a character in it. Yes, definitely we are not saying that the child will be able to understand the complex personality of a cartoon character, but the child may not consider the cartoon character as just an object moving around. It might consider it as an actual person. And do you see the difference over here? That in the sensory motor thing, the child wasn't even ready to consider the parent as an actual human being. I'm sorry. And during that stage, the child develops from there, considers everybody around them as actual human beings, and now is at a stage when is ready to consider cartoon characters as real people. Now, you can see one point which states that cannot understand conservation of matter. Now, there are a lot of videos that I've attached to this video, which you might see in Google Classroom. What it really means is that, let's take it in terms of an experiment. Let's say you have 2 glasses of water, and you're giving you have kept 2 glasses of water in front of a kid who is, say, about 6 years old, and both glasses are identical. You ask the kid, do both glasses have the same amount of water? The kid might most likely say yes, they both have same amount of water. Now take another slender but taller glass, thinner but taller glass, and pour one of the glasses of water in it. Now ask the kid which glass, the slender tall one or the normal glass, has more amount of water. Usually the kid would say the thinner and the taller one has more amount of water, because the height is a lot more and it looks like it might hold a lot more water, and this would be the reason that they would give you. Now the reason they cannot understand conservation of what matter, what the word means is that the matter has not increased in amount or decreased in amount, it has stayed the same, and that is a concept that they have not yet grasped up till now. You might also notice that some children are losing the grasping reflex at this point of time, but there are delays in it. And however, the eye movement action and the eye movement behavior is almost completely gone by this stage. All right, here there is actually an example that we have put in about less and more water, and you can also ask them about coins, and I have attached another wonderful video about the same thing. Now we are done with the pre-operational stage, where they cannot understand that matter does not increase or decrease when you move them from one place to another or put them in a slender glass or a thicker glass. Now let's come to concrete operational stage. Now this is a rather important stage of life, and this is where we are intervening mostly at. This occurs between the age of 6 7 to the age of 11 or 12, and you see development in abstract reasoning ability. They are able to understand not only just abstract reasoning ability in terms of the literary meaning of it, they are able to understand a lot of abstract ideas over here. Like for example, they will be able to understand politics, they will be able to understand economics, they will be able to understand uh, the reason I say economics is because uh, although some concepts of economics occur in front of you, a lot of concepts of economics occur on a grander level or a national level. You cannot see them, you have to just imagine them. And some of them do not really exist in physical reality, they actually exist as concepts only. They will be able to understand geometry and math a lot more better at this point. Um, for example, the concepts of angles, the concepts of angle bisectors or line bisectors, they'll be able to understand those concepts in a much more better way. Also, this is the time wherein they will start to write much more detailed essays, and it is usually suggested that most of your literary skills must be honed, or you should start honing these skills from the stage itself. Um, Primarily because since they are developing their abstract reasoning ability, if you put a little more focus on it, they might be more specific and they might understand it quicker and easier. Okay, I need to speak a little more about the stage. When we talk about concrete operational stage, yes, they have at this point understood conservation of matter because there are certain abstract factors to it as well. To understand that the matter cannot be destroyed and not be created, it can just be changed or transferred from one place to another. Uh, they will also understand concepts of emotions at this point. Uh, in the earlier stage, a child might understand that his mom is sad or is happy based on behavior alone and maybe facial expressions. At this stage, the child might learn to understand why the mom is happy or why the mom is sad or why his friends are happy and why his friends are sad. Uh, Another thing that you might notice at this stage is that the child might also consider his or her own emotions in greater detail. Uh, Although this might not fully develop by the next stage, you will be able to see certain aspects of it, and if you probe further, you might gain a better understanding of how they're gauging their own emotions. Uh, it is preferable to take workshops which deal with identifying one's emotion, empathy workshops, uh, workshops which involve role play at this stage of development. Um, so now we can move on to the next stage, which is your former operational. Now it occurs between the age of 12 to 15, but it can definitely go on for longer. Um, at this point, the child is actually able to think about hypothetical situations. That's say, it if this would happen. So, if I was if I wouldn't have got into that fight earlier. Also, they might able to form and test these uh, ideas, these hypotheses in their heads, like they might be able to imagine it properly. Now, as I said earlier, and the confusion over here that you might come up with is that I have spoken about role plays in the last stage, and however, if we are going to talk about hypothetical scenarios, uh, and if it occurs only in this stage, would it actually be more beneficial to take role play activities in students between the age range of 12 to 15? Uh, my understanding of this is that yes, definitely. Uh, Students who are in their formal operation stage would perform better and would be quicker at understanding the objective and the goals of role play in this stage. But however, when we talk about role play, the idea is to not really create a hypothetical situation. The idea is to jump into that situation, think about it if you were there. That's why we have actions related to role play, and we don't just think about it. So, in your last stage, you might want to have roleplay wherein you actually have props and a lot of other things. In this stage, you might not require the props. You can actually have students who just want to talk about the situation and not have an actual roleplay, and that might probably work as well. Um, Conflict resolution on conflict related and workshops about conflict resolution work really well at this stage. Workshops related to buddy system, workshops related to Just give me a second. Yeah, workshops related to buddy system, workshops related to token economy work really well at this stage. However, since the child is actually able to create hypothetical situations, they might also find loopholes really fast in this stage. And that's why some people call this stage and the follow-up of this stage as the rebel stage of a child's life, where the child is actually able to find loopholes, where the child is able to think about hypothetical situation. And ideally, if the child is guided properly, the child may be able to we may be able to help out in development of this ability, since this is related to imagination, and this is also related to most of what we do in our professional lives, whether it be an engineer, whether it be a lawyer. We do think of hypothetical situations and how to actually find solutions by using our imagination. Hence, what we can really help the child over here is by taking workshops to better guide them in terms of imagination, to better guide them in terms of thinking, better guide them in terms of reasoning ability. They will most likely be more successful in this stage than in the last few stages. The child also learns to organize information. And one another thing that I would like to point out at this stage is that when I say organize information, I don't mean that the child would be much better organized, such that they will not make any mistakes in their organizational ability, or in their organization of information papers or documents. We're just merely saying that the child will be able to organize units of information. The schemas that we were talking about, the units of information that the child develops via observation or via activity, they will be better understood at this stage. The child will be able to think more and build more upon those schemas. In this stage, the ability to accommodate and assimilate would occur at a greater and faster pace than before. Um, yes, we have added the idea that the child will be able to reason scientifically, but what I really mean is that the child will be able to reason in any philosophical aspect. It may be a belief aspect, it may be a scientific aspect, and it may be a non-scientific aspect. um, we can help children, and we can develop skills of organizational skills at this stage. Now, we don't really mean that the child we develop professional level organizational skills, but we can help a child to understand goals and how to create sub goals at this stage. Now, Piaget himself agreed that as I stated before, that his stages of development are not independent of the environment. The environment plays a major role in development of these stages. And as I said before, uh, Piaget also had a lot of interest and a lot of knowledge about other areas of study. Hence, according to him at that point, based on what information he had, he said that children would develop much more better if we actually understood what are the genetic attributes that actually affect a child. Uh, However, there has been a bit of debate about how Piaget went ahead with this, because this happened later on in Piaget's life, almost towards the end of his life, wherein people actually figured out that Piaget actually had these ideas about genetics as well. What majorly is agreed upon is that Piaget stated that genetic factors play a major role, and in some cases a much more higher is of much more higher importance than the environmental factors. Now, yes, we will discuss about nature versus nurture later on. Uh, However, while creating intervention strategies using Piaget stages of development, we should really look into not only just genetic factors or environmental factors, but also cultural factors that play a role. Um, People have various belief systems and people have various habits, and they might actually hamper the the uh, documentation of your workshop, or the documentation of the development and progress in your workshop, if if you're looking at activity based workshops. Now, um, in terms of his moral theory as well as his cognitive theory, what Piaget really wants to say, and the major development on Piaget's theory, is the difference between understanding and realization. Um, an example of this would be, let's say I have a child, and I teach my child everything there is to know about the world and all the mistakes that I have made in my life. What you would ideally notice is that my child would still make a lot of mistakes. Although I have explained my child what mistakes I have made in my life and what are the other possible mistakes the child could make. The difference over here is that of just a mere observer and rule maker to that of a scientist who experiments and develops. You can have a lot of information and you can understand the information, but it is till the point you don't realize the holistic attribute of the information, you may not be able to use it optimally. Now, I'm not going to explain these aspects to you of Piaget's role and Piaget's comments on education and how to use his theory in education. The only thing that I can say over here is that Piaget did not believe that his theory is going to make education any easier, or the entire academic process any easier. Piaget's focus was on development and was not on education at all. Um, the confusion over here is that people who have developed their theories on Piaget's theories do definitely focus on the academic aspects of Piaget's academic application of Piaget's theory. Yes. So although Piaget said that there might be deviances and people might not achieve the stage in the same amount of time as he stated, what he did not state is that some children might actually get to the next stage a lot more faster. In fact, um, we know that some attributes of different stages might not occur in those stages itself. They might occur earlier or they might occur later. And for example, the idea of conservation on object permanence might occur earlier on in the stages than later on. And this is one of the major criticisms of Piaget's theory, because it has been well observed and documented that some children actually show some abilities a lot more faster than other children. And if we are and sometimes it's not even in the same stage. They might show abilities from an adjacent or the next stage in that given stage itself. Also, although Piaget stated that his development theory cannot be pushed forward and accelerated, we now know that, and especially from a lot of Chinese studies, that children can be pushed to do a number of things a lot more faster. And I am not actually saying it in reference to the last point that studies have shown that development can to some degree be accelerated. I'm just saying that because those studies, that the ones that they're talking about, relate to other developmental theories as well. All that I'm trying to say is that in terms of abilities, some it has been known that if you push the child that if you push the child towards gaining a certain ability, um, the child may gain that ability a lot more faster. However, at the same time, it's a very risky thing to do, because the child may also have a lot of side effects to that and may develop coping mechanisms which might be unhealthy. Alright, that was all. I will attach a lot more learning resources to this, and you have to watch it, because this presentation would be incomplete without watching the other videos. Thank you so much.